Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wine Voices, where we explore the people, trends, and ideas shaping the future of wine. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to a man who's poured for the Gettys, to the Gorbachevs, who's paired vintages with the Oscars, who has spun vinyl with DJ Shadow between tastings. It's the one and only sommelier to the stars, Chris Sawyer.
Whoop, 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 whoop. I'm glad to be on your show, Barbara. This is awesome. Yep,
Thank you so much for making the time.
you got it. My
Well,
pleasure.
oh, thank you. I like to start out very simple here, just in your own words. How did you get into wine?
I was born into wine, let's just put it that way. I was born in Sonoma County, everyone. And Sonoma County, when I was a kid, was a little bit different than it is today. It was more fruit trees and and cows and pastures and things like that. And today it's a lot more about wine. And I watched this whole thing happen. So I was born in 1969, and in the 70s when my mom and her bowling partners would take me over to Napa Valley. There were 8 wineries in Napa Valley. Eight. How many are there
Wow.
now? Like 300. Um, and here in Sonoma County, obviously, we had a lot of crops of apples, and the Gravenstein apple is one of the big ones that was here. We did a lot of things. But once the whole movement kind of caught on, and it's because of 50 years today was the Paris tasting. So we're talking about the Judgment of Paris. It's very famous for 2 wines from America, 2 from Napa Valley, even though I would always argue that it's also Sonoma County because Chateau Montelena sourced most of their fruit from Sonoma County. That won the Chardonnay part of that contest, and the Cabernets were from Napa Valley. But it was just amazing to watch these old vineyards that you'd play in, and you'd go play hide and go seek, but no one could find you because the trellis systems were so bad that they would just kind of flop over like Medusa's hair, every single one of them. And you'd go play hide and go seek, and you'd be under there, and no one would find you. And the only way you'd get anyone out is just yell "snake," and people would run out, and that's about it. Not fun. But those vineyards, a lot of them have been replaced with some of the most cutting edge vineyards of them all times. Those orchards I meant have been replaced with them. And so you have a lot of things that I've watched happen. Obviously, my how it kind of went for my family genus was actually that my grandfather, Carl Sawyer, worked for the Gallo family. So this was back in a time when the Gallos just really started revving it up there, back in the late 50s, early 60s, and really started doing these things that really would change America and also the world. I mean, Gallo is still the #1 producer in the world of wine. They own a lot of different brands now, so I've seen all that happen. But Gina Gallo is my dear friend, whose
Mhm.
dad Bob, my grandfather worked for. And when I met Bob, I said, "Do you remember my grandfather, Carl Sawyer?" And he just like looked at me. He said, "You mean my bowling partner?" And like, whoa, damn! And he like kind of froze there, like he was like dreaming of this one time when they got that strike that won the championship. I have no idea, but it just froze him. And so my grandfather worked there for 37 years, and when he retired, um, he had 470 people underneath him that were bottling
Wow.
wine continuously. So he was more the engineer and doing the bottling line there in Modesto, California, which actually has a very good wine scene now. I will say that for them. But it's really just an interesting thing that happened there. I went to college. Well, let's just put it this way. I moved to Oregon from Russian River Valley for 3 years. They filmed the movie Goonies there while I was there. You guys might have heard of
Nice.
Goonies, and it was filmed there, so I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, they filmed Short Circuit and Kindergarten Cop there too with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then I just moved back to California, back to Sonoma County, went to Petaluma High. I ran for student government right away. You don't know me, I don't know you. Let's meet. Why don't you elect me? And so I became entertainment commissioner, and I went on to become the editor in chief of the newspaper and yearbook. And then I went to Santa Rosa Junior College because I wasn't sure where I wanted to go to college and what I wanted to study. And I ended up being the the editor-in-chief of that newspaper too, which was really great. I never would have thought that I'd be a faculty member there someday teaching wine
Yeah.
classes, but I am. But how it kind of happened is that because of a girl, I went to University of California, Davis instead of going to Berkeley. If I had gone to Berkeley, I'd probably be a lawyer or a I don't know, political activist or something like that. There would probably be more me, but instead, I went there and I did study literature, but I dropped that because I couldn't argue with teachers about the meaning of books anymore. And I started sociology, and I was also the music critic for UC Davis at a time there in the early 90s when music was just starting to boom. So introducing winemakers of today that still come up to me and say, "Man, you introduced me to the Pixies. You introduced me to Smashing Pumpkins, Sonic Youth, and all these things." And yes, I did work with MC Shadow and who had his radio show right after mine, and so people were listening to me just because they wanted to listen to him. But it was actually this fateful time that I will say my professor that for the newspaper said, Chris, you need another credit, so we're going to make you Mr. Science Guy now. Everyone loves your things about what you do with wine, but or sorry, not wine yet. What you do with music, but now we need you to do some science stuff, and so you're going to talk to veterinarians about cutting bulls' balls off, and you're going to talk to brain surgeons about using digital things and using laser beams and all these kinds of things that you're talking about. But you're also going to interview people from the viticulture and enology department here at UC Davis, and I quite frankly did not know they had a department like that. But just interviewing those amazing professors there, it made me realize, oh man, you grew up somewhere really important, Chris. You didn't even understand this back then, because I'll just say maybe a little underaged or in high school days, but then in college days, wine wasn't exactly what I was drinking all the time. Did I appreciate the fact that my parents drank it and all these things? Yeah. And was it cool that, I'd go to these places when I was a kid? Yeah. But, it didn't really hit home with me until a little bit later. And that's just kind of how, when I started talking with Carol Meredith, Dr. Carol Meredith, who is just one of the greatest geniuses of this industry, and Ed Weber and some of these other great professors that I got there, they really kind of got into me. And so when I went back to Santa Rosa Junior College after I graduated, I was an assistant teacher there at one point for sociology, and I started taking the wine classes there. And it was another person, Graham Parnell, who worked with Vineyard and Winery Management magazine, and he said, "Hey man, can I?" During the break of one of the classes, he said, "Can I talk to you afterwards? Can you go have a beer with me?" I said, "Sure, teach, let's do it." But he just said, "You know way too much about wine in this class, so you could probably keep it a little bit quieter and don't mention everything. But, I really want you to write for me." And I had already been writing some stories, obviously, for UC Davis in the early 90s on wine. And there was also Neil. It was Neil and Company, who was like this big farming family over Jack Neil and Company, who the old editor in chief of when I was the editor in chief there at the JC. A great friend of mine, Mark, who was the president of the JC, actually ended up working for these guys. And he said, "Hey, man, I really liked your writing back then. I know you kind of like the wine. And can you write for this little publication?" So I was writing for a publication back in the early 90s about wine. And so these things kind of happened. It was really great. That's my
Yeah.
that's my brief part of how I became interested in wine. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So,
amazing that you've taken throughout your career all of your interests and kind of wrapped it up into to what you do now. So you've got the music piece and you've got the wine piece and still the writing piece as well.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
yeah, very
Yeah,
cool to
well,
see that.
I'll tell you another thing too, is just, I got the chance. How did I make money back then? Not because of writing. I mean, it got me places and there were things. What happened there at the JC too, when Graham Parnell got me to write for him, I got approached by someone else who was working with Wine X magazine. WineX magazine, still to this day, is the most cutting edge magazine that ever existed because there's nothing like it in the wine community. But we were way ahead of our time. So in the mid '90s, I started working with WineX magazine. Daryl Roberts was the editor, was the publisher, and it was just an opportunity for me to kind of become second in command there, start writing to more younger people. Generation X is what WineX stood for. We had more subscriptions than Wine Spectator did back then, and I'll tell you, everyone wanted me to be at everything. And I got these opportunities that were so big, flying to Germany, flying to Italy, flying to France, and learning about Bordeaux, and all these things. And I just sucked it all in. I just never, and this is if you guys learn anything from this whole interview, you will never learn enough about wine. Okay. That's just what it comes down to. Everything changes and everything, vintages change, and it's impossible to know everything about wine. So you can never learn enough. That's why you have to keep following it and keep drinking new wines and getting excited about these things. So I was there at a very special point. It also kind of comes back to Gallo and some of the great wineries of Sonoma County and the growers, Mike San Giacomo, whose family is very well known for growing great grapes, Gina Gallo, and pretty much Jeff Bunshu and John Sebastiani all came together to create something that, with Joel Quigley, my other friend, this thing called the Wine Brats. And so we were kind of obnoxious wine lovers, and they had about 35 chapters around the United States by the time it kind of came to an end, and when WineX kind of folded in the early 2000s. But I was flying to do some of the first wine raves in the United States, in Boston, in Atlanta, in Austin, in these places, and young people were getting into this stuff. And it was a time period there in the '90s where everything was changing. The quality was going up. Reviews were getting great for wineries. So many young cutting edge winemakers were coming out. People were getting acknowledged. Pinot Noir was discovered, even though it's been a grape for thousands of years. Cabernet was just moving up, but women had already made Merlot the number one red grape, and so there was a lot of stuff going on there that was really interesting. Chardonnay was starting its upswing because of the 50 years ago when the Paris tasting happened, and Chardonnay has become the number one grape planted all around the world. And number two is Cabernet, and it's because of that thing that happened 50 years ago. It's also the people that put those grapes in the ground even when I was born, so in the '60s, that they were really getting the recognition they deserved. America is very different, especially California, because there were no indigenous grapes here, like there were in Italy and France and places in Spain, of course. And so what happened was all these cuttings came over from the old world, and we didn't know how good could they be, or how bad could they be. The Europeans were great in teaching us lessons about where it could be grown because of the plantings before Prohibition. Even though a lot of them were torn out, you knew that they could be grown there because of the history of these certain areas. And so this was all coming together in the late '90s, and I was part of this. And like I said, we had more subscriptions than the Wine Spectator. And the reason that we folded was because of the change of the millennium, where everyone was paying money for us to do ads and promote their wines in our magazine. But then when 2000 came, they had a big decision to make. There was something called the internet that was invented right then, and so the thing is, you either made a website or you died. So what do you do? Pay money for WineX to promote you, or do you design a website with that money? And I'll give Wine Spectator a lot of credit for holding on and keeping alive through that. There were a lot of magazines back then, a lot of cool magazines in the late '90s that folded because of that. Luckily, I got to carry on my career. I got to write for the San Francisco Chronicle and Michael Bauer and really do some really amazing things also about spirits. A lot of this training too, for me, I'll say this, and it's kind of tie into this next point, about how I became sommelier to the stars, sommelier to the stars. That will be on my gravestone, by the way, you guys.
Yes.
And it goes back to something that just I got hired to work for a great catering company that did a lot of high-end stuff in San Francisco, and I got to work for a lot of very important people in our community that also drank a lot of wine and had connections with wines, or we do events at like Hansel or Ravenswood, and the winemakers started to respect me for what I did and a little bit that I knew, and they kind of took me under their wings and helped me become who I am today. So there was a lot of things going on, but this eventually led to me right around that the 2000 there, a little bit before that, when I started working for Gordon and Ann Getty in San Francisco. So the Getty family, I was the sommelier for them for 8 years. And right around that same time, I started working for John Lasseter, who was with Pixar, started Pixar with Stephen Jobs, and got to meet Stephen Jobs on many occasions, and Francis Ford Coppola, and all the people that came to the events at Gordon Getty's house. I mean, believe me, there were a lot.
Wow.
And it was, I'll give him all the credit for being probably the greatest philanthropist I'll ever know in my life. And I mean, it was like 3 times a week I was there. And sometimes you'd know how big the group was going to be when you walked in. Sometimes you wouldn't, because he had fake walls that kind of covered up the real Picassos with fake Picassos. So just saying. And there were things like that. But he always wanted me to help him pick out the wines, and when there were special things in his very private room afterwards with very super people. Jennifer, who is now the GM and president at one of the great restaurants, and for some reason, why am I spacing on my Berkeley restaurant that is totally great?
Chez
Um,
Panisse.
Say Panisse, exactly. Jennifer was a chef there, and she was also the chef for the Gettys. So her and I would have to taste these wines to make sure that they weren't poisoned, of course, just like the medieval days, but or that they weren't corked and stuff. And so her and I had some amazing things that we got to taste, and I tasted a lot, especially when I was doing this while working for WineX magazine, writing for the Chronicle, helping John Lasseter build his cellar, tasting things from Haut-Brion, Blancs, white wines from Haut-Brion, from Bordeaux from the 50s, like doing flights of that, like sure, yeah, let's do it. So it was a very big thing as I went to high school with Winona Ryder. In
Cool.
Petaluma. And so Winona Ryder was a very good friend of mine. She was there for the 1.5 years that she was. And her brother used to buy for us, just saying. And he did not show up one night. And we were going to watch a movie. It's called Name of the Rose, one of my favorite movies from the 80s. Had Sean Connery and Christian Slater, who she was going to be in a movie with, coming up. And so she wanted to watch this. And we didn't have anything except for wine to taste, and so I was sitting there drinking this wine, and I was realizing something, that this wine was getting better. What? Wait, they don't go downhill, they go
Yeah.
uphill? I don't understand this, because beer, when you taste beer, the more it sits in that glass, the worse it's getting. It's just drying out, and it's not very good. And spirits, if you put it on ice, you're diluting it. So every second that you're not drinking, it's getting more diluted. So wine, on the other hand, as I found out in this first experience of mine, that wine actually gets better if it's good. And so as this movie was progressing and I was following these characters and everything's getting all, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? The wine is going along with this. And so I feel like that was really the moment that I realized that wine was great. And so that was, I do not want to say my age when I was drinking those wines, but it was earlier in my life. I'll just put it that way. And it's just an important thing, because it kind of carried over to when I became the sommelier at the Lodge at Sonoma in 2004. And a couple of years later, I started working as the first ever sommelier for a film festival in the world. Sonoma Valley is where the history of California wine really started, as far as the industry that we have today. There was one original winery, and it was down that was commercially sold, and that was down exactly where the skyscrapers in LA are. But Sonoma Valley, on the other hand, its history goes back to, actually, this year represents the 200-year anniversary of when the missionaries made their first wines with the grapes that
Wow.
they planted 2 years ago, or 202 2 years ago. So they would have drank their first wine when it started to produce, when those vines started to produce crop, which is in the second year, you can get some crop. So we figure that this is 200 years since the first wine was ever consumed here in Sonoma County. And Sonoma Valley is where that happened. And it is where I really spent a lot of my time with that catering company and also working for private people like John Lasseter, who had a house there and everything. So I knew a lot about those wines. And because if you're going to make your wine or your film festival very unique, and you're in the middle of the, the where the birth of wine in California was created, why don't you do some pairings with wine and movies? And so the first year, I think I did 55 movie pairings with wine. And, I started these kinds of things that were just amazing, doing things with, Bruce Willis and Susan Sarandon and Joan Allen. And, probably one of my favorites is Michael Keaton. It was the year that
Mm.
Birdman came out and he won the Academy Award. It was just showing at this film festival as a, no one was seeing
Wow.
this on the big film stage. And I created something that was very unique where I designed this thing with clips from his movies like a Beetlejuice, Mr. Mom, which is amazing. Go back and watch that, you guys. It's amazing. And Batman and other movies that before the movie showed. And I walked up on stage and Michael's up there with John Lasseter. And he's kind of like, oh, who is this guy? And someone from the audience said, "That's Chris Sawyer, the sommelier," and so I went over to the side where I had this sheet over these wine glasses, and I pulled them out, and we all tasted wine pairings I did with each clip, and they were from Hanzel and Dick Arrowwood from Arrowwood Winery and these other wineries, and it was just something special. And I'll tell you how much that meant later is that after the movie, we were like, "Oh wow, this movie's really good. I hope he wins an Academy Award." He did. He came to a party, Michael Keaton did, and he walked right in and he passed everyone. There's, "Oh, Michael Keaton, Michael." He just walked right up to me. He said, "Man, I want to thank you for what you did up there. I can't stop thinking about those moments. I thank you. I was thinking all through dinner about it." And just making an impact on someone's life like that is just,
Yeah.
some of the things
Making
that
an
were
impact on Batman's life.
I know, Batman and Mr. Mom's life. He needed stuff rather than the cheap beers he was guzzling in Mr. Mom, and watching soap operas in the afternoons. But it just was all these kinds of adventures that I got and getting to meet people like you did mention at the beginning, Mikhail Gorbachev, and that was a very special moment where it's a very funny story where I was doing a lot of private catering things up at what was called Moon Mountain at the time. It was called Carmenet before that, but it's a very special winery up on top of the mountain of the Mayacamas Mountain, overlooking Sonoma. It's now the Moon Mountain appellation, and it's a really great thing. I knew the winemaker there really well. I got to work with really great chefs there as well. But one day they didn't really tell me what it was about, but I pull in, I'm like, "Oh, wait, there's only two vans and a limo. Who's here?" I didn't even know who it was. And so I go in there and they're like, "Oh, Chris, you're going to take table one. You're going to serve the wines there." And yeah, that's Mikhail Gorbachev right there. Like, "Oh, wow, amazing." And so I served him, and he was like, "Wow, I really his English was fairly broken, but he said, I like this wine. Can you tell me more?" And so yeah, I'd tell him some about the wine, and it was a great thing just to be there with him. But this is where it gets good. So everyone leaves. So these are kind of people there was a charity he was supporting, and they all kind of go down the stairs and they leave in their two vans. And so it's just him and his bodyguards. And all of a sudden, this bodyguard comes up. He's like, "Oh, they have whiskey here. Oh!" And all the bodyguards run downstairs. So it's just me and Mikhail Gorbachev. And so I pour him a good bottle of or some glass of Cabernet Franc, and because he liked it so much, I said, "Let me show you where this vineyard is." It was a completely full moon night, and we're up there, and you look up on the top of the mountain, the peak up there. it's called like the feather block or something of this vineyard, and I showed him exactly what we're tasting is right from there, and it was pretty amazing. I mean, he does have a bald head, and the moon reflecting off of his head, and him wearing a members only jacket, and all these kinds of kooky things that I remember about that. But this is a man that helped uh, the world become a better place. And I'm sitting there, and we're talking about wine together, and it's a really common thing between us that we care about it. And eventually, I did get some calls from his secretary. They really enjoyed me, and so I started helping him with some charity things as well. And so, these things have kind of gone on. My all the things I did at the film festival led me into a lot of important things that I do private, cellars for people. All my times over in Napa Valley led, with great winemakers over there, as well as Sonoma County, and going down to Santa Barbara or going up to Oregon, and Willamette Valley, watching that area. If I would have known about wine back when I was there, man, might have just stayed there. But that didn't happen. But all of these things happened because they were supposed to, in my opinion. And just, was I paid a lot by the magazines originally? No, but did I make up for it by working for the Gettys and the Lasseters? And yeah, of course. And do I enjoy my life now? I really do. And I think that some of the reasons that I speak so much is because of something that happened at the lodge too, where the new GM there said, Chris, what do you want to do here? You've really put this on the map, but you've only been here a few years. What do you want to do? And I said, I really want to actually do classes once a week and just teach the locals about things that I know and bring in great producers and get them exposure and get the people staying here at the hotel excited that they learned
Mm,
something from us. And I did over 500 classes there, in the
wow.
10-year period. For some of them were for corporate groups. I do stuff at Sonoma Mission Inn all the time now and do all these things for big, production companies, everything can be linked into wine if you really use your brain. I did stuff for Joseph Abboud suits at Nordstrom's up and down the West Coast, and my pairings of the amazing jackets and slacks, and the full suit designs with, Tony Soder's wine from Willamette Valley when I'm up there, and pairing these things. And, I got to do things like be the world's first ever poetry pairing sommelier who did it was called Litquake in San Francisco. And so I was working with four or five of the best poets ever and pairing each one of their poems with a wine while these people were going ooh ah over these words and drinking the wine. So, creating these experiences has been, a really something that just kind of kept going. It's just like a rumble effect. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, all the things that I do. But they're really fun, taking what I knew and things that, I really learned from three of the best sommeliers that I learned from that were really my godfathers of wine for being a sommelier is Fred Dame, Bob Bath, and Evan Goldstein. I mean, the pretty much the original sommeliers. If you go through, Fred Dame was the first ever in America. Evan Goldstein was like really the sommelier, where his mom was a really well-known chef in San Francisco and started One Market. And
Yeah.
Bob Bath was just a guy that could suck in information and bring it out and spoke like a true genius. So when I went to Telluride and did these things, I'd bring them with me. And I love it how Fred Dame still calls me Sawyer man. How's it going, Sawyer man? Instead of just hi Chris, Sawyer man. So I enjoy those things. And just how lucky was I, in all these kinds of things. But I think you could say it's luck and stuff, but my job really is to share these experiences with people and to get them
Mm,
excited about it. And I do that. Today I do a lot of these things at celebrity cruises. I have my own thing which I do there, and I bring in the wines and I teach these classes, and it's through with Costco Travels, and there's one coming up this December, you guys. But the first one I ever did, they said, well, what do you want to call it? I said, well, Pinot Paradise in the Caribbean, of course. I mean, it sold out in 3 days, 100 rooms on an expensive
wow.
ships sold out, and Costco came to me and said, "Oh my God, this never happened. Do you want to bring your family?" Yeah, of course. So Sonoma County Vintners called me and said, "Sawyer, the things that you were doing there to build this for us, we want you to do for us too." So now we do pour and explore events here in Sonoma County. Barbara, your husband, and some of the
Yeah.
wines that he makes, at Paradise Ridge, we did it. We did one of those events there. I got to interview your husband, Daniel, and he's great. And I've been following his wines. I was writing reviews of those wines when they first came out, and
Yeah.
another person that was kind of associated with us that we both have a great link to is Honor Comfort. And she kind of
Yeah.
had me doing things with sommeliers from around the world when they'd come here too, because I was very an expert in a lot of different things. If we did it at Sagacio and talked about Zinfandel, I want to be there, and she wanted me to be the speaker there. So that's kind of my first part of how I got involved with Sonoma County Vintners. On working for them instead of being approached by them as a writer. So
Yeah.
let me just say this, that what makes me an interesting character in the industry is that I started as a writer and then I became a sommelier. It is completely the opposite. There's only one person I can think of, and it's Patrick Kaminsky, who would be the only person I could ever liken to that, because most of them will do the exact opposite of that. They'll be sommeliers and then they'll start writing, or they'll
Mm.
try to just be a public speaker and things like that. I did it the complete opposite way, and I don't care which way I do it. I just want to make people have fun and learn more about wine.
I love it. Yours is such a story that reminds us that wine is fun. Wine can be incorporated. I think you said it at one point, like wine is belongs anywhere, whether that's at, a very formal tasting with a head of state or at a rave. Someday you'll have
Yeah,
to talk more about these wine raves, but
yeah,
no, it's just a beautiful, and that's exactly the message that our initiative Come Over October is trying to spread, is that, just get together, do the things you already love, and bring
yeah,
wine along with you because it's connective tissue. It gets you closer
exactly.
to the people you're with.
And I think too, like good lessons I've learned from Sonoma International Film Festival. When you go into these events, I was the one that kind of started setting up having the wineries just greet people as they walked into the theater, and they'd have a glass of wine in their hand, and they're like, "Oh my God." It gets you going. You're there.
Mm.
But what a really good way of learning too about, and since you can do this in October, you can do it any day of the week, you guys, is when you watch movies, something that I said earlier about when I felt like I had been fully moved by watching a movie and tasting a great wine at Winona Ryder's house. It's true. But you know, that's how you can tell great wines from other ones, is how they develop with character development. Character development,
Mm.
storytelling, and character development is everything that movies are about. You got to have a good plot. You got to have some good characters that maybe you think he's an asshole at the beginning, but then at the end, you want to hug him, and you're like, oh wow, this is amazing. He's a real jerk, but now I love him. And you know what? You followed that, and your wine was getting better as you were following it. The movie was getting better. And so I think that a lot of these things that we come across in our lives, and just how it's fun to talk to people, just there. I've learned so many things from athletes too, and I think this is a very big part. There's a guy named Deshaun Elliott. He's the safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, and he actually came and judged a wine competition with us. And I'm like, oh wow,
I
this
love
is
it.
crazy. How is he here? And it's our great friend Jesse Katz that brought him, and
Nice, nice, nice.
Jesse's a
Yeah.
legend. But the fact is that this guy got into wine, and I'll tell you the story he told me. He got drafted by the Detroit Lions, and he was a smart kid, and he said, you know what? I want to get to know the veterans versus all of my rookie buddies. And so he'd sit with them. I guess on Friday nights you have a kind of a formal dinner with your team and stuff, and he'd sit with these older guys, and he'd try to order like, hey, I'll have a margarita, and they're like, oh, we don't do that at the table. We drink wine here. And as he continued to learn about wine there, it just changed his life. And people like Dusty Baker, the who was,
Yeah.
works with the Giants and is going to go into the Hall of Fame probably next year. He makes his own wine.
Yeah.
Plays people like Chili Davis, who was a great star for the Giants too. Man, that guy drinks a lot of wine. I talk with Chili all the time. You have a lot of these people from different
Yeah.
teams, and it's because they've had exposure to wine, and maybe it's higher end wine that they started with, but they like wine in general. And I think that what's happened in my time period here for 30 years plus of being sommelier is that the wines have done nothing but get better. And I think one of the biggest things there is that we have different categories that no one even knew about. We didn't even know pink wine could be dry, you guys. I mean, seriously, there was Matus and Lancers, and there was white Zinfandel, and it just that's what you had. And if you saw pink, that meant it was completely sweet. Today, it's the complete opposite, and all the kids don't know anything about those bad wines of the old days. So when they grow up, they're already knowing that rosé
Yeah.
wines, pink wines are an option. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm glad that the choices are so unlimited now, and that's why really helping with this movement that you're a part of, Barbara, is really important to me. Is just anything I can do to help people put wine on the tables and do these kinds of things and really make them happy, that they did, and make them go, I made the right decision. I can't wait to taste more styles like this, or just find things that really change their lives, that make their lives better, to be really honest. Drinking wine, going back to sports for a second, the problem with beer is, this is a weird trivial thing, but the most water in the United States is used in a 45-minute period every year. And it's halftime of the Super Bowl. And why is that? Because most people are drinking beer. And beer makes you go to the bathroom faster than wine. And really, when you're sitting there having a conversation that could be something like $1 million for you and this new company idea, and you go, I got to go to the bathroom, and you go to the bathroom, that conversation's never the same when you come back, just FYI. It's when you have wine, you just keep that conversation going until you feel like it's time to, like, what, let's get another bottle and we can keep talking about this, something like that. But I think that those moments with wine, it's like when you look at Mona Lisa, the painting, and you're there at the Louvre and you've got that glass of wine and you in your hand. It's different than when you're just standing there with a bunch of crowd.
Mm.
It's because you're having an artsy moment inside your mouth, just like you're looking at one of the greatest pieces of art. So they're very comparable in many ways, and that's why pairing movies is not that hard. It's based on characters, it's based on time periods, it's based on, are there three characters? Well, use a blend. Is it like something that's really uh, delicate at the beginning and bigger at the end? Then that's a Pinot. Look at some of the great movies like that changed the world. Sideways,
Yeah.
Sideways. If it wasn't for Virginia Madsen, and just those lines that she said about Pinot Noir, Sonoma County wouldn't be the same, to be really honest, because it made women already got Pinot or were getting into Pinot after Merlot because it's softer in tannins, and that's why it actually brings out the food, you guys. Not everyone doesn't eat steaks and potatoes every day anymore. And so it's a really important thing that movies have really made a big difference in the community. And I mean, look, Bottle Shock is a good movie. In some ways, it's not really as accurate as you would think because Mike Gergich made those wines and made that
Mm.
wine, not Bo Barrett and things like that. But little things like that. But did it get people to start drinking wine and or at least try things that were new? And there's a movie that I'm in called A Perfect Vintage, and it's on a lot of airplanes now that you'll find it on Delta and American and things like that. And it's a really great movie, and people come up to me, "Oh, I saw you in this movie on the airplane." Geez, so that's a good one to look for too for your guests. Is Perfect Vintage. It's a very good one, and it's really about Napa and Sonoma and just why vintages are so different. And you have to just ride it out like a great wave, and like just really, you don't know what Mother Nature is going to give you all the way till the time you pick it. You have no idea, and it's a very important one. It's about a very interesting wine that was planted up on this crazy vineyard up on the top of the mountain that got 100 points, and kind of everything around it, and these other kinds of wineries that are smaller boutique ones. And very, very cool. That was filmed back in 2015 or 16. I totally forgot about it because
Yeah.
of being blurry because of COVID. And when the film festival started back up, and I think it was 2001 that we did the film festival, came back. They said, Sawyer, you're in one of the movies. I'm like, oh, huh? What? And I totally forgot about this. Sure enough, it did it play there. Yeah, it won Best Documentary, and it would go on to win the Best Documentary at so many festivals across the United States that it actually became the first movie in 10 years since the movie Somm to be released across the United States on this big screen. So I'm very proud of that. And these things that we
Yes.
accomplish are very, very cool. It's all because of wine, you guys, all because of wine. Yep.
All because of wine. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. All these amazing stories. It'll be such a treat for, like I said, everyone to hear how wine can be a part of your life outside of just pouring yourself, a
Yeah.
glass and
Yeah.
pontificating.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Barbara. I love what you do, and I'm very supportive
Thank
of
you.
this, the Wine Voices, and it's really important to hear what we have to say because it helps educate people, and I love doing it, and I'm really glad to be on your show.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope I get to see you in person in Sonoma County soon.
Absolutely. And for everyone else, you can find me on SawyerSom.com. And I also obviously have a lot of stuff that I do. I'm very well known for my selfies that I do with a
Yes,
lot of important people in the industry and people that just follow me on Facebook and Instagram. It's a lot of fun, you guys. And that's
it
what
is.
wine makes your lives funner, and it makes you realize things about little parts of life that you're like, oh wow, wine is really good and makes these dishes better. And I give a lot of credit to Food Network too for helping us remember that we do have palates. And if it wasn't for Food Network, I don't think we'd be talking the way we do, and I don't think my career would be the same way either. So, cheers on that.
Nice plug. So good to see you. And
Thank
thank
you.
you again.
You got it. Cheers.